When my son was 6 years old, he used to love drawing. For the most part, it was usually innocent stuff, like superheroes, animals, etc. But one day I walked into the kitchen and saw him drawing something a bit strange. He drew a woman dressed in all black that had long black hair and glowing red eyes. I asked him, "Who was that supposed to be?" And he replied, "That's Mrs. Robin." "Oh, who is Mrs. Robin? Someone who works at your school?" I asked. "No, Mrs. Robin is the woman in our basement. She comes in my room every night and tries to take me into the basement with her. She told me that I'm her son, but I told her that she's not my mom, and if she could please go away." I literally almost had a heart attack when he told me this. I sprinted into our basement with a bat, but as you can imagine, nobody was in there. Luckily, we don't live in that house anymore, but it still freaks me the fuck out, just thinking about it. I was babysitting my niece Abigail while my older sister was out of town for work one weekend. She wanted to play hide and seek, and then asked if her new friend could play. I was confused when she asked, but then assumed that maybe it was just an imaginary friend. So I said, "Of course your friend can play with us. What's his or her name, and what do they look like?" I asked. "Her name is Mariah. She says she knows you, and that she misses you a lot. She has long blonde hair and brown eyes. How could you forget?" I felt my entire body break out in goosebumps when she said this. Mariah was the name of my girlfriend who died in a fatal car accident 1 whole year before Abigail was even born. And I don't remember ever telling my niece about her. I don't usually believe in the paranormal, but I just couldn't come up with another logical explanation to how she could have known her name and what she looked like. When I was younger, my parents told me they ran into the bathroom after they had heard me screaming from across the hallway. They found me on the shower floor crying hysterically and pointing into the corner of the bathroom saying, "He's trying to get me. He's trying to get me. The shadow man is trying to get me." Apparently, I gave them a description of the figure as a short, dark, and demonic-like creature. I think the weirdest part about all of this is the fact that I have zero recollection of this event ever taking place. But both of my parents assure me that they had never seen me so frightened in my entire life. A few years ago, I babysat my neighbor's kid when I was still in high school. I was pushing him on a swing set that was in his backyard as he stared intently up at the night sky, when randomly he tells me, "You know they're coming for me, right?" "What? Who's coming?" I asked. What he said next caught me completely off guard and genuinely freaked me the fuck out. "The gray people. From up in the sky. They've been in my room before, and they want to take me away forever. Please don't let them take me." I was completely horrified and stayed awake with him all night until his parents came home. When my son was really young, maybe around 4 years old, he used to have 2 imaginary friends named John and Joan, whom he played with all the time. For the most part, nothing terribly weird ever happened, until one day I saw my son crying in his room. Naturally, I asked him what was wrong, and his response sent chills down my spine. "John and Joan killed a girl, Daddy. They stuck her head in the potty, and she stopped breathing. I don't want to be friends with them anymore. I would say maybe 1 to 2 weeks after this incident, my son told me that John and Joan wouldn't let him sleep at night, and they were mad that he told me what they had done. My wife and I were worried that maybe my son had a potential mental health issue, but we did take him to see a few doctors and even a therapist who told us that he was just fine. When one night, we heard my son arguing with someone in his room. We peeked into his room and saw that he was out of bed and standing next to the closet yelling, "Leave me alone." My wife was a big believer in the paranormal and didn't want our son to be harassed by whatever entity was clearly in his room. We moved out roughly about 2 months later, and our son has never mentioned John and Joan ever again. When I was still a college student, I would babysit part-time to make some extra cash. I was babysitting this little girl named Denise who was extremely timid and hardly ever said a word when I babysat, which, as you can imagine, was pretty awkward, but at least she wasn't a troublemaker. There was this one time, though, when I was making a sandwich for her in the kitchen. Denise tugged on my pant leg and said, "You know, the last time I had a sandwich was when I had my final meal, before those bastards executed me." "What?" I exclaimed, but Denise just said nothing, and just started eating her sandwich. Believe me, I told her parents later, and they were just as shocked as I was. My mom used to run a daycare for babies and toddlers ranging from newborns to 6-year-olds. I remember visiting my mom's place of work one afternoon after school got out. I said hello to this little girl with big brown eyes and short curly hair. She waved back and said, "You pretty. I want to be pretty too. Can I wear your skin?" I was tucking in my 5-year-old daughter into bed one night, when she looked up at me with a concerned look on her face and asked, "Daddy, why doesn't that man have any eyes?" What man, sweetheart?" I asked in a confused tone. "The one who comes out of my closet every night after you tuck me in. Why doesn't he have any eyes?" I received a concerned call from my son's preschool teacher about something that he had painted during art class. She refused to divulge to me what he had painted and insisted that I had a meeting with her after school. So, after work, I drive to meet my son Matthew and his teacher in the now empty classroom. She picks up the plastic art easel and shows me what he had painted. I was disturbed when I saw that he had painted a tree with 3 bloody stick figures hanging from one of the branches. "Matthew, why did you draw this?" I asked. But he broke down instantly and started crying. I hugged him and said, "It's okay, Matt. I'm not mad. Can you please tell me why you painted this?" "This is what happened to my old mommy and daddy and me a long time ago," he said. "We tried to escape the farm, but the ghost man got us." I was completely shocked. I had never believed in reincarnations prior to this, but this honestly scared me, and it's kind of made me a believer since. I was babysitting 3 kids between the ages of 3 and 5 one day. 2 boys and 1 girl. The oldest boy, age 5, was named Caleb, and I noticed some odd behavior. He had his hands pressed against his ears, and he was mouthing the word, what appeared to be no, over and over again, while the other kids were playing outside. I walked up to him and asked, "Caleb, What's wrong? Is everything alright? But he had a genuine look of terror and also frustration on his face. And he responded by saying, "The wind keeps talking to me. It won't leave me alone." And literally the second a bit of wind would pick up, he would freak out and say, "Go away. Stop the whispering. Stop the whispering." The other kids looked over at him in horror and said, "We don't hear any whispering." I told his mom about this once she picked him up, but she swears that this has never happened before. There was this weird kid that I babysat once named Jacob. He was a bit strange, but overall seemed totally harmless. But something he said one night really stood out to me and genuinely gave me an eerie vibe. "The boy in the mirrors wants to kill you." I sprung off the couch and noticed that Jacob was standing right in front of the mirror. "But, Jacob, that's your reflection in the mirror," I said. "Oh, I know," he said with a sinister grin across his face. One night, my wife and I awoke to our daughter screaming in terror. "Mommy, Daddy, help." We quickly made our way into her room and asked her what was wrong. "The floating man keeps staring at me," she said as she fought back her tears. "Honey, what floating man? There's nobody here," I responded. But she just kept crying and insisted that some floating man had grabbed her by the ankles and kept staring at her.